Modernism is the most paramount style of philosophy of architecture and design of the 20th century. Modernism had an approach to the function of buildings. It involved rational use of oftenly new materials, an openness, and eliminating ornamentalizing. It has also been called International Modern or International Style, after an exhibition of modernist architecture in America in 1932 by Philip Johnson. Modernism also encompasses futurism, constructivism, Dichtich, and Bauhaus, use of general cubic or cylindrical shapes, flat roofs, use of reinforced concrete, metal, and glass frameworks. This often results in large windows in horizontal bands, an absence of ornament or moldings, a tendency for white or cream. Plans will be loosely arranged, often with an open plan interior. Walter Gropius and Louis Le Corbusier were the leaders of the movement. The latter had profound impact in Britain, particularly after World War II, with many public housing schemes, such as the Harvard Graduate Center, also known as the Gropius Complex. The physical Gropius hallmarks, large windows, flooring rooms, floating facades on raised pilotis, are all present here. All four architects were also active in interior design and the design of objects and other elements that characterize 20th century modernism. Of the four, we chose to focus on Walter Gropius. He may not be the father of modernism, nor was he an architectural artist who made his mark in extravagant designs, but he was a mentor and a man who led the future of modernism, thus the title. Youth and early training of Walter Gropius. Walter Gropius was drafted in August 1914 and was served as a surgeon and then as a lieutenant in the Signal Corps in the First World War. He survived being both buried under rubble and dead bodies and shot out of the sky with a dead pilot. He was awarded the Iron Cross twice. Gropius then, like his father and his great-uncle Martin Gropius before him, became an architect. Gropius could not draw and was dependent on collaborators and partner interpreters throughout his career. In school, he hired an assistant to complete his homework for him. In 1908, after studying architecture in Munich and Berlin for 4 semesters, Gropius joined the office of renowned architecture and industrial design Peter Behrens, one of the first members of the utilitarian school. His fellow employees at this time included Ludwig Mies van der Rohe, Le Corbusier. In 1910, Gropius left the firm of Behrens, and together with his fellow employee Adolf Meyer, they both established a practice in Berlin. Together, they shared a credit for one of the seminal modernist buildings created during this period, the Fargus Werk. In Germany, a factory building for the Workband exhibition in Cologne. During this time of working in collaboration with others, he picked up an interest in the interrelationship of art and architecture, as he saw its potential in having it both merge, thus creating the commitment and dedication in promoting his ideas on the arts. For he argued that building techniques as prefabrication of parts and assembly on site, while also including the artistic aspect in it. He felt that it was the duty of the artistically trained designers to breathe a soul into the dead product of the machine.
The style that Walter holds in great influence is the International style during the emergence period. The International style emerged largely as a result of 4 factors that confronted architects at the beginning of the 20th century. The first, increasing of dissatisfaction of buildings design that incorporate with a lot of mixtures of decorative features of different architectural periods, especially where the result design bore little or no relation to the function of the building. Second is the need to build large numbers of commercial and civic buildings at the serve rapidly industrializing the society. Third, the successful development of new construction techniques involving the use of steel, reinforced concrete, and glass. And fourth, the strong desire to create modern style architecture for modern man. This is underlying the need of neutral, fictional, functional style without any of the decorative features of Romanesque, Gothic, or Renaissance architecture, all which were old-fashioned, if not obsolete. The typical characteristics of international styles buildings includes rectangular forms, plain surfaces that are completely devoid of applied ornamentation, and open, even fluid interior spaces. This early forms of minimalism had a distinctively modern look, reinforced by its use of modern materials, including glass for the facade, steel for exterior support, and concrete for interior supports and floors. The design principle for international styles are to have asymmetric forms or shapes, rhythmic, and simplicity repetition. The case study that we are focusing on is the Bauhaus. Prior to the end of war, Walter was obtaining attention for his ideas on art education. He took up the position, becoming the director of a number of renowned art schools, which later known as Public Bauhaus Weimar. In my opinion, it was the first collaboration that started him on the path of fame. At the school, much activity was focused and centered handcraft, including ceramic, weaving, stained glass, and haven of artistically curious in mind. Envisioning the center of art, he opens the door on to the designers, also welcoming arts of various backgrounds. He thought expanding the use of sample material use such as wire, wood, and paper, also psychological effects from colors and texture. Many of this thought and philosophy revolves around the idea that these elements are intertwined. Was the leading voice in the early styles, but he strays away from ornamentations and the earlier idea of beauty. We see this as the way of him evolving his form of art with the ever-changing trends. He moved to calling form follows functions. It was architectural battle cry by the 1930s. Although ornamentation was still present, the focus shifted into the interior design, constructed and form. The contrast in materials and the angles was to be main focal point in the architecture. The idea was to replace the formal stresses to heavy decor with the items was functional and pleasing to the eye in its simplistic manner. School in Weimar, Germany. It was a teaching and learning center for modern industrial and architectural design, and in its heart, the belief and principle of bringing all the arts together with a focus on practical utilitarian applications. Dominant virtues that can be seen were thought to be shaped by the 19th and the earlier 20th century trends such as arts and craft movement, with the major influence from Le Corbusier's 5 points of architecture. The main elements of the complex are the glass-fronted, 3 stories workshop wing, where the workshop wings and vocational schools are connected by 2 stories bridge, which was used for administration purpose. Groupier's private office was also located here until 1928. The workshop wings and the studios building are connected by 1 stories building, which is so-called the festive area, comprising auditorium, stage, and canteen is located. The studios building was able to house and cater the needs of both of students and junior masters in 28 studios flats, which measuring 20 meters square. In short, let's talk about the impact of Walter's Bauhaus and his international style. As later 2 other institutions arise as a revival brought by Van der Rohe and Mahalinegi independently. Mays in Chicago, thus continuing the program in USA, while the USA proved to be one of the refugees location upon the rise of Nazi. Many Jewish Germans dispersed to other parts of the world. In correlation to that, approximately 4,000 buildings were rises in Tel Aviv since 1930. According to and in honor of Bauhaus principles or the international style, this site, so-called the White City of Tel Aviv, is now part of a UNESCO World Heritage. Apart from the most obvious example, the Bauhaus is the indirect influence on the development of many other movements and styles in the future. Back to Bauhaus school building in Dessau. As Venturo said, and Gropius proficiently implemented in this building, taking a look at the building as a whole with the smallest of details, it is inevitable that one will be overwhelmed with the sense of unity in architecture. Every aspect is made and executed in the most sensible way. This is where the Bauhaus was the heaven of famous professors inhabited in their loved ones. For example, Paul Kill, Wesley Kandinsky, uh, Leonie Feininger, and the man himself, Walter Gropius.
Now that we've been given a perspective of Walter Gropius's upcomings, his transitions in life, and his insight to this period, we now look at how he represented, spread, and influenced the movement. It is because of his contributions that has led him this far to becoming one of the giants. Here are examples. The first, the MetLife building. In 1959, the three architects came up with a revised plan of a larger building with an elongated octagonal plan and a very bold precast concrete facade. Stern, Mellins, and Fishman observed that the new design was based on a well-known prototype by Le Corbusier, unrealized skyscraper for Algiers, 1938 to 42, and was also related to Gio Ponti and Pierre Luigi, technologically innovative, far more severely proportionate than the under construction in Milan. The architects Emery Roth and Sons gave it a facelift, if one would term it, a simple exterior of aluminium and glass, and a long rectangular axis that ran from the north to the south of the 457-story building. They took into consideration of what was already done and decided to retain much of the silhouette of the earlier structure. Concerned that the initial design was not of adequate quality, they brought in two high-profile modern architects, Pietro Belluschi, designer of the Equitable building in Portland, Oregon, and none other than the man himself, Gropius. And so they revised not just the building's skin, but its placement, which changed its outlook today. Gropius did more than just commercial buildings as well as project-based events. He was also a man at heart for small purposes and individual dreams that he felt he could realize with his drawings and ideation. One of it would be the Josephine M. Hargrave House. Completed in 1938, Walter Gropius and Marcella Brewer designed this structure that sits on a spectacular rock site with an outlook on the Atlantic Ocean, thus granting its given name, the Box on the Rocks. The Haggerty House was initially conceived as a summer house, but was later converted into one with residential use later during the design phase. The client, John Haggerty, was an undergraduate at Harvard, whom, thanks to the man Gropius himself, converted to modern architecture because he was attending one of the talks that he held in London. He combined major elements that complemented the environment by using rough stone walls and wood siding. This not only allowed it to match each other, but also provided the necessary contrast in texture for the material to stand out. The stone walls provided a conceptual framework for the planar walls of the wood and the steel volume of the main living spaces. It also acted as a protection against potential damage from tides and storms. Only the garage is on the ground floor. A high stone wall wraps around the U-shaped court facing the ocean, providing privacy from the road, while the upper floors span across the walled-in garden. This uses the same concept as the Gropius house in Lincoln. The facade faces a blank street except for narrow windows and sills, while the ocean side opens up with large panes of glass and generous terraces and balconies. The L-shaped plan recalls back to Le Corbusier's Villa Garches. He did more than just commercial blocks, houses, and conceptual buildings. But from the views of it, Gropius was more than a man who wanted to bring ideas that will impact this period. He was a man who wants to see it apply and distributed. So, from one of his many contributions to the community is none other than the Harvard Graduate Center, built in 1950. Up till today, it is considered as an iconic staple. Up to today, the Harvard Graduate Center is still noticed and seen as an iconic structure for its educational purposes as well as its structure. It has throughout this period grown into the society. It was designed by the architects' collaboration, including Gropius himself, where 8 buildings are arranged around small and large courtyards that has a good community feel about, and it's relative to its humanly scale. The dormitory blocks are constructed with reinforced concrete, with exterior walls of buff-colored bricks or limestone, a material that's upcoming in during that period of time, one that is picking up in its popularity amongst people in this industry. Block mass buildings connected by flat roof canopies. The entrances of the halls are common with the same material, reinforced concrete ramp that leads up to the dining rooms. As said by him, a quote, "A good design considers not only the building but also the larger context, the community, and the environment." This shows a lot of his consideration to how it plays with both its user and its environment. Although some may have preferences, but Gropius was a man whom I believe was very open to expanding his scope beyond just the basis of art. He moved on his work in applying it into the religious aspect, and a great example would be the Temple Oheb Shalom, a Jewish temple in Baltimore which was built in the 1960s. He designed 4 massive vaults as seen on the above that represents the turbines that housed and protected the Torah from the outside. The synagogue on the inside was made to accommodate guests that participated in the prayer. And the intent that we get as a viewer was to capture the aesthetics that will allow the spirit of peace to abide in the space. The original space of this room was a sanctuary that was a former establishment. He retained it, but he improved on it. The Temple Oheb Shalom was said to be built in a new suburban home, and approached was an architect consultant named Leavitt. But it was him who suggested that he would engage someone with a bigger reputation to consult in help with the raising of funds. Aesthetic had nothing to do with it, but Leavitt suggested Gropius because of his interaction with him recently. Leavitt visited Cambridge, where Gropius was at Harvard, and they two had spent time working on designs. In the end, the synagogue features and the functional aspects of the building were probably Leavitt's. There wasn't much information to be found regarding the Temple Oheb Shalom and Gropius's involvement with it. However, from the looks of it and the research that we have done, we can see that this man Leavitt, who was also a known prolific synagogue builder as Percival Goodman, another young American-born Jewish architect who championed modernism, they both showed and modeled after what Gropius's beliefs are. And as you can see from the many pictures that we have, another one would be Portsmouth, Virginia, the Gormley chest. a lot of its elements did not fade, where they used many of the same language that Gropius, as well as this period of time, emphasized a lot in. So it has come to shown that Gropius was more than just an architect. He was an impact to this particular period. Of the four champions in this period, Gropius chose to be a mentor. He chose to be a teacher in this field, to impart knowledge, impart ideas, values, and be the mentor that educates his students hands on the interactions between the elements that he uses and the interactions in its environment. Of the many designers and forward architects, he was, in the view of the many, the underdog, the unseen, the unspoken hero, the one who had passed on knowledge, and because of that, the knowledge lives with architects after him. It is through the efforts of the Bauhaus, his interactions, his collaborations with architects, that he has imparted knowledge, he has spread, and he has influenced this particular period.